I'm Amanda Rose, Library Director, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. I hope lunch was good. Hope you enjoyed lunch. The sandwiches are provided by Chocolates. And thank you for your donations. They help us provide lunch for the next program. And we do have another author program scheduled for next month, and you can sign up after this right up at the circulation desk. So I hope you'll be able to do that. And then there's bookmarks for our whole lineup, and then we're going to have another concert. So just throwing in some neat new things for you guys, and we're just so happy that you can be with us today. So today we have Michael Barnes, and he's going to tell us all about Austin. So welcome, Michael.
We'll experiment with this. Tell me if you can hear me. All right. I usually don't need this. A little bit of theater in my background. So this is a beautiful library. You're very lucky. And a beautiful city. I love coming out here. I don't come out enough. In fact, I hadn't been here in so long that when I took the drive out 70, whoa. This is going to be Green Hill. No, it's not anymore. A lot of things have changed on the way out here. I am Michael Barnes. For the past 30 years, I've written about the people, places, culture, and history of Central Texas. In 2015, my first book came out, Indelible Austin, Selected Histories, published by Waterloo Press, which is the nonprofit imprint of the Austin History Center Association, which are the friends of the Austin History Center, which is part of the city public library system. And it was so successful, we went into a second printing and we're about to go into a third for the first volume. And in 2018, the sequel, Indelible Austin, more selected histories came out, and it's doing well as well. So these are collections of my historical columns in the paper. They're meant to link old Austin with new Austin to bring the past into the present. They're not exercises in nostalgia. I don't think that there was a perfect time in the past when everybody got along and everything was perfect. There are wonderful things about old Austin and wonderful things about new Austin, and that's what I love to celebrate. And I say Austin as a shorthand for Central Texas because there are stories about all kinds of communities that are nearby, and I'm always looking for more stories from surrounding communities. And so anyway, I am going to read a short selection, and then the important thing is to open it up for questions and comments. That's always the best part, and I know you're prepared for that. So I went back and forth about which piece to choose, and I just opened up a page and went, this one works. This one really works because it's personal. And it also indicates what all of us can be doing to start looking at history a little more carefully. I've always been interested in history, but I didn't start in the right places, which would be my family. This one's a special trip to the LBJ Presidential Library. I certainly didn't expect to stumble on these three words while looking into a Texas group that had reformed mental health care in the 1930s. But there in black and white pages was a familiar name on a list of founding directors. That would be my grandmother, my mother's mother. Alongside her name was an additional clue, Texas Relief Commission, All along, I'd known that Grandma Keating, a kindly but complex woman, had been a social worker of some sort, and that she had held fairly high positions in her field. Although I have researched diverse topics since the 6th grade, I had never bothered to find out more about her. A reminder, if you're interested in history, start with your family. A fairly simple Google search showed that her first job out of college in the early 1930s, she headed the El Paso Family Services Agency. And she then became director of the El Paso County Board of Rehabilitation. By 1934, she was living in Austin as a social service consultant for the Texas Relief Commission. She later was listed as director of social services for this group, established in March 1933 by Governor Ma Ferguson to address unemployment in Texas. Now, none of you were alive during the term of Ma Ferguson. I don't know. But we had a wonderful lady. Am I getting a little feedback here? Yeah. Do you want to try and see if you can you hear me now? Okay, good. We had a wonderful lady who worked in food service in the Statesman building back when we had enough employees to need a food service station, and she was cranky in an endearing way, and she was especially cranky one day, and I said, "What's up?" And she said, "Well, that Governor Perry, I think this was the first time he ran, his parade on Congress Avenue stopped me today. I couldn't get to work." And so you don't like him? I haven't liked any of the governors. I said, "None of the governors?" And she said, "Well, Ma Ferguson was okay." Like, whoa! She went back a ways. I learned that my grandmother also testified before a select committee of the U.S. House of Representatives in 1941 on the subject of interstate migration of destitute citizens. She spent the later part of her career as regional representative for the Southwest for the Bureau of Public Assistance, now folded into the United States Department of Health and Human Services. She is profiled on the National Association of Social Workers Foundation website as a pioneer. None of this I knew. What I discovered next should give folks another reason to visit the marble-clad monument that overlooks the University of Texas campus and is known as the LBJ Presidential Library. Along with swell exhibits and events, you might find family history there. Born in Minnesota in 1901, Val McGuire, in some records spelled differently, and later married to petroleum engineer Thomas Keating, earned her social work degree from Catholic University in Washington, D.C. I'll skip some things. She had 2 children, Elizabeth, my mother, and go on. But hadn't she at one point donated some letters to the LBJ library? This half memory was lodged in my brain. My sister, Kathleen Barnes-Klingshirn, confirmed that she was in the car when Grandma and her longtime companion, Catherine Taylor, dropped off the letters at the library. She also recalls the doubts the women harbored about the future of the Keatings' 12 grandchildren, including me. Clearly, we were underperforming at that point. She changed her mind when I was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. My grandmother died in 1991 at age 89. She was buried alongside her husband as well as her companion and my father in Bahia, Texas, a place where she never lived and rarely visited. The thought of doing research at the LBJ Library had always seemed daunting to me. Anyone who has visited the Great Hall atop the library's grand staircase has gazed up at the glass-fronted rooms that make up part of the National Archives. One gets dizzy just staring up at row upon row of imperial red boxes. Of course, certain patient scholars have spent, no kidding, lifetimes there. First tip, call ahead or use email. Detailed lists of the holdings are easily accessed online, but you also need a guide. Mine on January 5th was archivist Brian McNerney. When you arrive, please tell the front desk that you're going to the reading room to do research, the spokeswoman told me. There you'll fill out paperwork and you'll be trained to use the library, and realistically this takes about 2 hours. I was set. McNerney took me into a windowless office, carefully explained all the procedures, and then pulled some references to my grandmother. Some of those, as always in research, led to dead ends, but others were significant. I ran across correspondence between First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and LBJ about the trouble with naming an African American to the State Board of the National Youth Administration. Now, you probably know this, but the kind of junior WPA was the NYA, and Johnson, his first big responsibility in his career was as the hard-charging head of the National Youth Administration for Texas. And some of the fun things that I found had nothing to do with my grandmother, such as a September 11th, 1936 check from the Treasurer of the United States for 85 cents. Attached is a note from the White House dated December 13th, 1963. Don't you think it's time this is cashed? Everything else almost was precious to my mission. Take the 9 letters dated from 1936 to 1939, exchanged between LBJ, then State Director of the NYA, and my grandmother, who's listed in the file as Director of Certification and Intake for the Works Progress Administration. In 1936, LBJ wrote to Keating, that's my grandmother, "Nothing I could ever write could fully make you know how grateful I am for all you have done to make the NYA a success. After you left, I saw that you left with my men a little of your own initiative and efficiency. Each was just as admiring of you as I am. I believe that if I never listened to anyone else but you for advice, the NYA in Texas would still have the best chances of success." Already quite the politician. Subsequent letters proved that my grandmother took LBJ up on the offer, and that her suggestions were often frank. Another administrator called one of her notes to LBJ harsher than it really needs to be. But LBJ was always solicitous of her help. On February 8th, 1936, he wrote, "I am confident that you will be proud of the orphan organization you took under your wing too long ago." But not so fast. One of the archivists produced an oral history interview with my grandmother that I didn't know existed, conducted by Michael Gillette, now head of Humanities Texas. It's dated February 2nd, 1979. In these 21 packed pages, I sensed my grandmother's voice, smart, funny, full-throated, for the first time in years. The original tape has not been digitized to my knowledge. A perfect example of her retrospective humor came when she recalled that the Texas Relief Commission Board had tried to force its new state director, Adam R. Johnson, to get rid of her. Why? Keating. The 3 reasons he reported to me was that I was not a Texan, I was a woman, and I was a Catholic. He said, responding to the board, "She is a Texan, she's from El Paso. She is a woman, I can't do anything about that. Yes, she's Catholic, but by so-and-so he was a great cusser. I don't have to pray with her." I held the job from the beginning to the end. Others urged Adam to let her go because she was the most insidious force on the state staff. Why were you insidious? I wasn't. They were the ones who made the charges, I suppose, because I spoke out rather clearly on a good many subjects and that weren't necessarily pleasant to them. Do you want to elaborate on those subjects? No, I'd like to get to the subject of the discussion, namely Lyndon Johnson. And so my grandmother, as she would in life, gently took control of the conversation. What was Lyndon Johnson like in those days? Well, he was tall, slender, handsome, outspoken, energetic, and sometimes brash. She detailed the tensions between LBJ and Harry Drought, the state head of the Works Progress Administration, a parallel agency whose Texas headquarters was in San Antonio. Lyndon was impatient and wanted things to move fast. Mr. Drought was heavy on protocol and on the legal aspects of public administration. My grandmother acted as peacemaker. Often, she counseled LBJ in her sixth-floor office in the Littlefield building. We would have heart-to-heart talks about how to reach certain goals, though I think I was only 5 or 6 years older than Lyndon. I tried to keep him calm. One of the turf wars concerned possibly moving the NYA to San Antonio to be closer to the WPA. But even more important from LBJ was finding youths who qualified for the NYA work and could be properly certified. This was the thing, is my grandmother had the master's degree in social work, a rare thing back then in the early 1930s. And so she was like, you've got to document everything. And LBJ just goes, here's a poor boy, just bring him along, put him in the back of the truck. And this is my mother. I don't remember that there were any women in his group. I maybe should have gotten after him about that. But they were absolutely loyal. One thing comes across in my grandmother's testimony: LBJ really cared about people in need. This was not an act. Time and again, she talks about his ecumenical concern for others, no matter their backgrounds. What was his attitude towards blacks in the NYA projects? I never thought he had an attitude. I mean, maybe I saw what I wanted to see, but I always felt that he was dealing with boys and girls, human beings. I couldn't tell you that he had an attitude for or against yellow, brown, black, white, anybody. I believe, in other words, on that subject, he was a mature person. That's it.